See, I mean, the public didn't probably know that General Foods is owned by Philip Morris, so they thought they actually were getting an ad out there, because all he was doing was scamming dough out of their budget to keep his magazine going. Now he's got a problem. Third case, Boston Edison. Well, those of you who are with utilities will know what I'm talking about. It's tough out there today. It's very, very tough. And if you run Plymouth, and if you're Boston Edison, believe you me, it's tough. So what did they do? Well, they ditched their old, this is 2-3 years ago now, they ditched their old typical employee communications vehicle. And they came up with a thing called This Week. This Week comes out Monday a.m. See, because their problem isn't to keep the employees informed, their problem is to keep a stiff backbone, you know, to let them, when they go out to lunch, they don't say, I work at Walgreens. They say, I work at Boston Edison. Okay? So it comes out at 7 a.m. on Monday morning, and to get people to read it, the strategy is that it doesn't fold vertically, it folds horizontally. So when you pick it up, you see it's like this, and then like that, and then like this, and then like that. So if you hold it up like this, it'll fall down like all the Christmas cards did this year, you know, with all these folds. Okay? Strategic. That you can understand. Okay? Now let's take a look at what some of these cases mean to us. First of all, it's obvious that there are 3 potential audiences for a publication. For any kind of publication or printed matter, there's an internal audience, there's an external audience, and then there's the both audience. Now, one of the standard budget top-outs is to do a both. Well, we're already doing this thing anyway, we'll just send it to the employees. Or, well, we're already doing this thing for employees, we'll just send it to the other audience. Well, I leave it to you in your own organization to decide whether that's good strategy. Let me just say that it's very, very, very tough to do in most cases. What we know about looking at these 3 audiences from the body of knowledge as we approach this question, should we do a publication of any kind to it, is Jim Grunig's research on when are people interested, really interested in getting some information. When they're interested, what he calls an active audience, people act in response to publications totally differently than when they are a passive audience. And partly his research shows that a targeted publication, not trying to be all things to all people here, although you can pull it off sometimes, but that a targeted publication is very, very important to people who are an active audience. Now, in most cases, that's going to be the people inside your outfit. Your employees, your members, your alumni, well maybe. 10% of the alumni, maybe. They need targeted publications. Now tell me, when then can you put out an external publication? You can put out an external publication most of the time when you are able to identify very specific needs of those people. But external publications which try to be mass publications, like the news media, simply fail the test most of the time because it is not an active audience which wants a targeted communication. Mass publications or mass media communication do not reach people who are already interested and active. They reach people who don't think they want to think about it, and you force them somehow to think about it with publicity or with a mass communication. So right away we know a couple of things. We know that the chances of this audience being valuing a publication are many times larger than this audience unless you really are able to segment and target that external audience with the kind of skills that most of us are only now learning. It's a critical piece of research, and I don't want to spend a lot more time on it. Now, if indeed those are the ways that we can use a publication, let's take a look at where this publication has to fit in. Let's take a look at the real hurdle in this whole process. Over here on the one side, we have people's thoughts, their beliefs, if you will, their attitudes, their opinions, information that they might get, which is primarily what publications do for us, their value system. We have all of those things, and all of those things eventually come together over here into what I will call a person's position on the subject. Okay? Now, the point is, we're trying to move that position over here to behavior so that they are sufficiently motivated and committed that this goes to that. And right in here, of course, are the barriers. Those barriers are peer pressure. Oh, what are you doing that for? What did you buy one of those for? I had one of those dumb things once. It never worked as a lemon. Okay? Risk, fear. We never did it before. All of those. You make your own list down here and you'll have a pretty good way of determining all the things you want to do or want not to do in public relations. All right, now, to the extent that a publication can actively attack those, that's the number one job. I didn't list them, but it's peer pressure and it's risk or fear of risk, and it's we always did it this way and all those other motivators. And to the extent that it can add something here, then that publication has a chance of being effective. And notice the reverse order there. Notice the reverse order. We used to always think if you could deal with these, then people would move to this, and then they'd move to this. Now we know that that's not true. In fact, for most of the organizations where I am actively involved in counseling, we bring people together to try to come to some kind of a structural change which forces the behavior. Now obviously you've got to get people to participate in that. If you just Napoleonically dictate that, you're going to have a revolution. And more, when I explain, the reason we're going to do it this way is because then, you know, it'll be a substitute for willpower. It'll be a lot easier for us all to do it. Everybody nods their head and says, yep, that's right, because it'll take us 20 years to change our attitudes all by themselves. So you just set up the structure that makes us do it. So that's why this is number one. Now if you look at these here, it's clear that publications, for example, have impact on some of these areas and very little impact on others. Certainly information has got to be, that's the best we can do. We can certainly deal with people's values, and people's values today are so critical to them that if anything you publish doesn't immediately establish the value system of your organization and how it might link with the value system of the recipients, you're probably, well, let's say your chances of misconnecting are very good. People today are into values. Thoughts, well, we can probably stimulate some thoughts, but I wouldn't worry about those three. We probably can't do enough. We can do nothing about people's values. It takes 20, 25 years or total mental reconstruction to do anything about that, according to the psychologists. Attitudes and opinions, well, those are even opinions. You could probably deal with people's opinions. I'll give you that. Okay? But those are the two things that the publication can do. So how do we do all this? Well, the research is pretty clear on what publications can do for these various kinds of audiences. Let me share the research with you first, and then I'll tell you why. For internal audiences, there are about 3 messages worth fussing with. The rest of it, frankly, is a waste of time and money. The first message, this is for internal audiences. The first message is what's happening to the organization and my job. What's happening to the organization and my job? What are the plans for the future? How do I fit into those plans? People everywhere today have those questions on their mind. The research is just undeniable. That's number one on everybody's mind, whether they're a member, an employee, a stockholder, you name it. A neighbor. Every neighbor of every organization in the world today wants to know what are they going to be doing tomorrow. What are they going to be dumping in the back? Are they going to have a lot of employees? Are they going to build something that will overshadow, you know, my bedroom window? You name it. Okay, so that's first. What's happening and how does it affect me? Secondly, the organizational culture and hopefully role models and stories that illustrate that organizational culture. Probably the single most important thing that anybody publishing an internal communication vehicle can do today is to constantly feature role models, to put the spotlight on people who are doing it right. like. Now, please don't call them role models. They immediately become ineffective as role models as soon as you label them as role models. Now, think of the number of publications in organizations you read where people are not selected for that. The lady that has 42 cats. Tom has a collection of stamps, right? Hey, that's for NBC, the New York Times. They're the great entertainers, not us. Okay, our job is to show people doing their job in a way that says to others, you ought to do it this way. Your future here, happy work life, pay raises, all are linked to doing it the way the role model does. And not only that, the role model is thinking smart, so it's probably a lot easier if you're lazy, do it this way. All those motivators. Third thing. Dullest possible part of any internal publication, and yet absolutely essential. And that is to make a big deal of the organizational rituals. That awful story that all of us in our editorial wisdom combined to the last page, you know, about everybody got their 5-year watch. You force them to read that. I'm serious. You stick it up there where they can't miss it, which again is a chance for us to use our creative capabilities. Because we want to get across to people, these are the rituals of the organization. If the president holds an annual meeting for the employees, that is the stuff we cover. Because it reinforces. Beyond those three, forget it. Bowling scores, oh my God, please, please. Okay? Now there are those who argue, well, now wait a minute. Bowling around here is part of the culture. Wonderful, then run it. But if it ain't, don't. Now notice what's happening here. Something really awful is happening here. Editors are being asked to edit. And I suggest to you that's something that hasn't been done for years. If we got a lot of stuff, we add 4 pages, right? Get it all in. No. People aren't going to read it. So we edit it down. If it doesn't meet this test, out. How about external publications? Four things that research says make them worthwhile. One is awareness. It's to force people, if you will, who didn't think they were interested, to process the information and say, hey, I might be interested. The second thing is to reinforcement. Can we reinforce? If I'm a little computer company and I've got a users group, you bet I want a newsletter going to that users group. I want a constant reinforcement. Hey, you're a Wang person. Ignore all those stupid salesmen from IBM and Apple and that there dingbats. You stick with Wang, right? To reinforce what's going on. Thirdly, and this is a critical point, and many organizations say that this is how they justify their external publications. And that is to put people's expectations of the organization and its products or services in perspective. One thing a targeted publication can do, you see, is to tell, hey, look, the advertising department got a little bit away from us, you know, they went crazy with all this stuff. Don't believe all that. I mean, don't believe our ads, in other words. Here's the real scheme. Here's what really you can expect. There's probably more difficulty around that issue today than in any other in general communications. Building up expectations that no organization can meet. And it all comes from this idea that everybody's after image. An image, remember, an image is phony. It's a projected image. The trouble is, as soon as an individual has experience of the product, service, or organization, the image disappears, and now they're dealing with a substance, with a real thing. And in all that image building, we build it up so big, you know, that I mean, St. Paul couldn't live up to it. So, bingo, they're all let down, and they wonder, well, what was all that about? And it, if anything, becomes perhaps negative in many cases. Perspective is critical, and there is a fourth one. And the fourth one is that we can build a true reputation as opposed to an image based on recital of absolutely hardcore, definable activities. Things we have done that cannot be gainsaid. Okay? All right, if that's where we're limited to in publications, let's take a look and see how